Michigan looking for a share of the Big Ten regular season crowd, and they get that crown with a 10-point victory over Minnesota tonight in Ann Arbor. And welcome into the Michigan basketball postgame live show here on the Maize and Blue Review. We're ready to get things underway. 77-67. Michigan wins it, and wasn't the prettiest game for the Maize and Blue when you watch this one. But in the end, Michigan, they were a big 22.5-point favorite. They didn't cover that, but they do end up with that share of the Big Ten title. They want to get it outright, and they've got a couple games to do that, starting with their next one against Illinois in Champaign, so they could get it done there. But it was a short-handed Gopher squad who they could only put one player out there off the bench. So they're 6 deep, but they hung around. They made it a little run to keep it close in the end of the first half. They made a few shots in the second half. And then finally, I think if you watched it, Michigan started knocking down a lot of triples in the second half, and Minnesota ran out of gas predictably, but they were, game for, 60-70% of this game. Michigan probably a little bit hungover from that Duke game being so much hoopla surrounding Michigan Duke on Saturday. So even if they won that one, you can say, yeah, we got to come out, we got to be energized, you got to do all those things, and it's human nature. But key bucket in this one comes in the second half with about 8 minutes to play. LJ Kaysen hit a three, put Michigan up by 13. We'll go over all of these numbers. We'll look at your feedback. Michigan was up by, I'll say, just 4 at the half, 32-28. They were up by as many as 10 in the first half, but only had that 4-point advantage, spelled advantage wrong on the score sheet there. So get that red pen out. That's a turnover on me. U of M's bench putting their best foot forward in the first half. Roddy Gale Jr. had 7 points. Trey McKinney with 6. But you looked over there, Yaks only had 1 shot, and he had a goose egg in the scoring department. And, Yaks is Michigan's, he's their go-to player, or he's at least I guess you'd say their best player. They're expecting more than a goose egg, is the 0 over there for Yaks. And 32 marked the fewest first half point total this season for Michigan when it came down to it. Let's look at the box score before we get to the feedback and see what people thought. Elliot Cadeau, a bounce back game, and he hit a couple early. Had 15 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists. This is a nice stat line: 6 of 10, 3 of 7, just 1 turnover in 31 minutes of play. Nice job. Mara, 10, 5, and 2. Namari Burnett, who was scoreless against Duke, he had 8, 4, and 3. Morris Johnson Jr., not a big game from MJJ or Yaks. Look at Morris Johnson Jr., 6 points, 7 boards. Yaks with just that 1 triple, 3 points, 2 boards, and 4 assists for Yaxel Lindenborg. Here's the bench. That's what did it for Michigan. LJ Kaysen. I liked how Dusty put LJ in for Namari Burnett, and you have Kaysen out there along with Cadeau. And I like that, having both of those. I don't know how many times this year it seemed like if Kaysen was coming in, he was coming in for Cadeau, but had them both out there. Trey McKinney, he had a dozen. He bounced back from his game out in D.C. And then Roddy Gale, who had 7 in the first half, 9 and 7 for Roddy. And Cheddar was out there a little bit, ended up grabbing a board and got 2 assists. LaFonso Ellis called him his boy or his favorite, something like that. He was talking about Cheddar in holding him in high regard. Nothing wrong with that. From the announcer, let's take some of the feedback, see where the people are at, what they're thinking about when it came down to this game. And Derek says he realizes this was Gale's personal best game of the season, but he was absolutely brutal. I think Dusty was testing him to see if he can continue to play him against quality teams. I think Dusty is hanging in there with Gale because he, at some point, is, you feel like last year, I've said this probably just like anybody who watches or covers Michigan basketball, probably said it a dozen times. He had 26 against Texas A&M. He was the number 1 star in that game, and he really wasn't all that hot in the regular season. In fact, that's putting it nicely. And he was pretty good in the first half of the year, but, not so good in the second half. And when you start, sometimes you get it. You say, well, he does more than what the box score suggests, or, when he makes a bad play, it seems like it's 2 or 3 bad plays. And, you got to hang in there with him and all those things. But, he's played enough games where maybe he'll get hot, maybe he won't, but it's not the most comforting. Roddy Gale with the ball in his hand driving is not the most comfortable thing out there if you're a Michigan basketball fan. And, he say deserves a little, negativity or whatever else. It's just what's he going to do? If he did not have that 26-point game, you'd say, wow, man, this is, he's going to cost you. You're saying it last year. Then he came up. So that's it. Zyman calls it a meh performance tonight. The effort tonight will not beat Illinois on Friday. I think everybody agrees with that. That's a good point. I think meh. And then, part of it is you look over there, you say, the Gophers got 6 players. You're going to run them off the floor or win by 30 or 40. Combined with the Duke hangover, people would call this a classic trap game because you have Duke and then you have Illinois, and in the middle you have a sad sack, again, a shorthanded Minnesota team. So you half expect it. Not Ripstar says Yaks was mid tonight. That's accurate. The 3-point shooting was solid. 3-point shooting was really good in the second half, not so good in the first half. 5 for 5 from the stripe. We'll look at overall Michigan. I'm seeing if the ended up 5 of 6, the box score that I'm looking at. Yeah. 39-18 should have been a bigger blowout. Should have been a bigger blowout if Michigan was knocking down shots in the first half. And Minnesota knew they're playing one of the top teams in the country with only 6 guys. And when this was the first time that they were in this situation, so they're on the road. They're doing everything that you could say, circling the wagons, exhausting everything out there. Knowing that no one expects them to stay within 20, and so they hung around there. GDSPE says the state of the program is strong. Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, they're hoping to get to Indianapolis. Under Par says agree. Illinois will beat the brakes off of U of M if they play like that. I'm looking forward to Friday's game. That's going to be a lot of fun. Yaks needs to wake up. Michigan Go Blue 1324 is pointing out that Gale did a nice job on the glass. So how about that? 7 boards, 9 points and 7 boards for Roddy Gale. this Minnesota team beat the Spartans at home. That's what GDSPE is saying. I think I remember that. Low energy, seemed disinterested. Yaxel was not interested in playing today. Yeah, those are, I don't know, I was going to say spot on, harsh, but I think that a lot of times when you're watching, you're thinking that, and I think everybody else is thinking that. Uh, to me, it's human nature. It's what are you going to do? You're going to take a cattle prod and tell these you guys, you've got to bring it. Eric says the 3-point shooting had to be in the game plan because there's no way Yaks in a day and Morez should have had as little shots and touches as they did. Well, Michigan's offense is they'll call some things like any coach. I mean, they're not just over there standing on the sideline with their arms folded, but Dusty talks about all the time in flow. And if you get a shot and if they're packing it in, well, then you go out there and you take those threes in rhythm and you knock them down. Oh, there you go. I'm Yaks is ready for the NBA draft. Apparently, he clearly had no interest. The thing about Yaks is he's not necessarily looking for his. There was a few times when I was looking at it thinking, he passes up shots a lot. Now, you want to talk about the second half against Duke? He was really good in the first half against Duke. Wasn't so good in the second half. In a game like tonight where Michigan was going to win, I think Yaks is just looking for his teammates. I don't think, talking about him getting ready for the NBA draft, that's a little bit of overkill. But hey, I mean, everybody, I asked for people's opinion, and they're giving it. Kayson's got a start on Friday. Start for Burnett. Yeah, the Michigan backcourt, Burnett and Cadeau and Kaysen. Remember, I think I would say he does not have to start on Friday. I don't think I would say I would not start him on Friday. But if I have Burnett out there and he misses his first shot or two, I'm going to LJ pretty quick. I'm going to LJ really quick with the quickness on Friday against Illinois. So that's it. Not Ripstar asking the question, who is the most reliable three-point shooter on the team right now? Most reliable three-point shooter on the team. Well, it's not, you think Burnett, the starters, Burnett and Cadeau in the backcourt, but we just saw Cadeau against Duke, so I wouldn't say he was reliable. We've just seen Burnett put up the goose egg, so it's not going to be either of those two guys. It's not Yaks. So then you're going to the bench. I feel like right now it would be Kaysen. That would be Kaysen and McKinney. Those would be the two that I would say if you wanted a three, and not that they should be shooting the most threes as well. Grady, we have known that for a while. I didn't know if that was that official tonight. Did they say something? He's had the shoulder, and I think for a couple weeks now that we did not expect Winters Grady to play anymore. A couple more knocking. Gale. There's Don talking Illinois. Does it matter that Illinois has won the last 9 versus Michigan when Michigan's got a completely different team, Illinois with a completely different team? It's a tough place to play. Illinois is a top team in not just the Big Ten, but the country. So, it's a great test. Going out there, if Michigan can beat Illinois, that'll be a great win. Of course, then they'll be outright Big Ten champs, but this is one, as you look at the rest, is tough. Yeah, everybody, look, they're going to have to play. Of course, they played like they did against Minnesota tonight. They're going to lose by double figures at Illinois. They're not going to play. when you walk into Assembly Hall in Champaign and you've got all the, the Orange Crush going crazy. Everybody's talking about this one. You've got a ranked team like Illinois, and you're getting that much closer to March and the end of the season. I mean, Illinois, a top 10 team. Yeah, tonight it was a sleepwalking, and there you go. That's a little bit what you expect. So that's it. A bounce back. How about that? Hadley wasn't impressed by tonight. Like everyone, how did the Michigan bench have tonight? At one point early, they had the half of the total points. That should change going forward, but that won't win you a national championship. Yeah, Yaks having a goose egg in any half is not going to win you a national championship. Morez Johnson Jr. having the totals that he did, not going to win you a championship. Shooting like they did in the first, that's not, no. So, right, they got to play a lot better. I don't know how lucky. I think if Minnesota knocks more down, they play a little bit different. So there you go. Should I be watching Arizona and Baylor? I'm watching the Big Ten crash out plane crash story. I haven't watched that yet. It could be debuting here tonight. All right. Let's talk me into it. Baylor by a bucket with 5.5 to play. It's Arizona's ball. Arizona looking around. They get it to Burries, who drives the lane. Left-hand layup is good, and that'll tie the game with 5:20 to go. Okay. McCarth says Duke hung 100. That was against Notre Dame. I watched a little bit of that. That was over pretty quick. Michigan just doesn't get up for inferior teams. Hope this doesn't bite us in the tournament. Yeah, I'm not going to get worked up. When would I get worked up? If they lost to Illinois, am I getting worked up? I'm going to say no. If they lose to Illinois and then Iowa, and you're faced with having to beat Michigan State for, to have the full share of the Big Ten, knowing, Tom Izzo would love nothing more, and then bring his team in, and, Mr. March and all those things, he's going to get a little. There hasn't been much adversity this year for Michigan. So I'm not. I'm going to wait and see what happens on Friday. My dog's growling at me. There's no reason to growl. Speak if you want something. She just wants to go on the podcast. That's it. So there you go. Let's look at some of the numbers and everything else. You have Michigan. They're 26-2 overall, the number 3 team in the country. They're 16-1 in the Big Ten. They just want a share of the Big Ten title, best start school history, but they played a listless game tonight. People are like, well, they do this on Friday, they'll lose. They play like this in the tournament, they'll lose. All of that is true. It's time for our Maize and Blue Review player of the game, and for that, we go to LJ Kaysen. He had 14 points, 5 boards, and 2 assists, 5 of 9 from the floor. And in 19 minutes, he hit the biggest shot with 8 minutes to go, put Michigan up 13. And that's why LJ Kaysen is our player of the game. When you look at some of the other numbers, mentioned Michigan, they were the number 1 team. Everybody knows by now that they fall to 3 behind Duke and Arizona. They remain number 1 in the Ken Pom rankings, and they still have the number 1 defensive team. Sometimes when you watch them play perimeter defense against the 3, you say, this is the number 1 defensive team in the country. Yeah, I mean, they are statistically. And then they've got a top 5 offense. If I'll play this game, if we would have told you through 28 games that have 2 losses, and these would be the numbers for Ken Pom and the rankings, you would say, sign me up. I like that. Same thing with the NCAA evaluation tool. This is what, when they sit in that selection committee and they've got all these things, this is what they use. Michigan's number one. And, so if it's not selection Sunday, but if it was, Michigan would have that number one overall seed, and all that stuff that should have been, dealing behind the scenes that came out like, oh, Michigan prefers this and they prefer that. You're like, yeah, I would prefer that you would keep all that under wraps until actually we get a little bit closer. But, they put it out there on Saturday. Michigan won, Duke, Arizona, Illinois, number 4, even though they're 10 in the rankings. You're talking about a Fighting Illini team that has a net of 4. So this is another Final Four type matchup. And if you want to call it Elite 8, okay, I'm with you on that. If you win the Ken Palm, then you are the champions in my book. It's what it is. It's nice to look at it, because a lot of times you say, well, we're relying on 66 Associated Press voters, media voters, and how people look at the media. They're a bunch of clowns. They're biased. And, they're not going to give, they're against Michigan, and there's some truth to maybe some of that, but not as much as people want to make it out. So then you say, well, we need to look at, just take the bias out of it. Well, that's what the net is, and that's what Ken Palm does. So, and then some people are driven more by the numbers than they are by the rankings. It's all understandable. Michigan's doing pretty good where they're sitting at right now. Let's check the upcoming schedule that is brought to you by the show that you're watching right now, this feed that you're listening to, the Maize and Blue Review. And we'd love to see you over on the Maize and Blue Review. We're talking Michigan basketball. A lot of football I've noticed over there. Hockey, as they head into their final weekend before the Big Ten tournament. It's going to be great. Great drama. Let's take a peek at that schedule. We just have to put it up on the screen. Can we do that? There it is. Thank you. So yeah, we'll get another dub over there in the left-hand column. And then Friday at 8:00, that's the big game in Champaign. We'll be with you here on the Maize and Blue Review. And then a full week off almost. When they head to Iowa City, and then the season finale, which I am expected to be at. The season finale against Michigan State. So fired up for that. Michigan going to have that triple bye, and the Big Ten tournament's going to be awesome. GDSPE says should easily win the Big Ten title outright and play Nebraska in the finals. I don't know about the Nebraska in the finals, but you could play Illinois in the finals. I would say that Illinois, Purdue, Nebraska. Do I want to say Michigan State? Somebody always makes a run. Is that a Wisconsin or UCLA team that beat Illinois? I would say that it would. I saw LaFonso Ellis, they just put a graph up. I don't know what kind of criteria Ellis was using. Was the graph said teams are surprising teams or teams that he likes or something? Iowa was on that list. That's what I'm trying to say. Would I go down all the way to Iowa as teams that I would think could win the Big Ten tournament? Michigan, Illinois, Purdue, Nebraska, State, Wisconsin, UCLA, Iowa. That's 8 teams. You're getting all right. Feeling generous and put all 8 of them on there. So that's it. What I can tell you is that we will be with you on Friday night after the Illinois game. We'll also be here tomorrow taking a look at what's going on after a night and taking a look at everything. If there's something football-wise to get into, we'll be there. Same thing on the hockey side. So thanks so much for tuning in. Michigan wins this one 77-67. They're off to their best starts ever. 26-2, even though, it wasn't a, bloodletting, smashing performance by Michigan. They get the job done. And now we'll see what's up on Fridays. They get right back, and you're talking about a marquee game, an awesome college basketball game. We'll be cranked up for that one. What do we got here? 78-77 with under 2 minutes to play. Zona and the Baylor Bears. It's exciting. All right, you coming on? You want to come on the show? Special guest star? Come on. You got to get in there? Special guest star. Okay.